Okay, everyone, we're ready to start. My name is John Benedictus, Executive Director of the National Soccer Coaches Association of Canada. And today's topic is on Rondos. And hosting it will be our Technical Director for the NSCAC, Tony LaFerrara. And our guest coach and speaker today is former Director of Coaching with the United Soccer Coaches and also technical advisor for the USYS Olympic Development Program, Ian Barker. And so just before I give you the control there, Ian is going to have a presentation. You can always ask questions on the chat or in the Q&A. And Ian, I'm going to have you, or Tony and Ian, you guys could take over. Hold on a second.
Yeah, Ian, would you prefer that we ask questions at the very end, or
there you go,
whenever there is a question, I guess?
Anytime you're monitoring the chat box, Tony, is good with me.
Yeah, okay. Johnny's going to be doing that, so we can ask the questions anytime. Ian, so before we start, I would just want to say that, you know, I always look forward to your presentation. You know, they're insightful, they're very engaging. Your practical advice, it's amazing. I've used a lot of your suggestions and recommendations over the years, and so I'm really looking forward to this one. And yeah, so I'm going to shut up and let you do it.
Okay, good. Well, thank you guys for having me. For the people listening, I have a long and fruitful relationship with NSCAC. Working with essentially the same organization in the US, formerly the NSCAA United Soccer Coaches. So I've been up to Canada a number of times. Many of you Canadian coaches have come down to coaching badges that we've run in the US. So I really think of this as a North American soccer program, with obviously lots of our guests from Central and South America probably on this webinar. So thank you to John and Tony. So just to get you going, and then Tony, if you just want to chime in before I start. Some years ago, 2018, I was sitting in my office, and there was a big debate on Twitter about whether you always do rondos, you never do rondos. Rondos are the savior of soccer. They're the worst thing that ever happened. And I felt like it was quite a polarizing debate, and it was kind of like Marmite. You either really liked it or you really didn't like it, and there was no in between. And then, despite the fact I was the director of something at a national level, I didn't really know what the word meant. So I sort of researched it, and my study came up that it was sort of basically keep away, forms of keep away. And then I thought, well, we've all been doing forms of keep away for years and years and years. And so sometimes we do them, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we have different variables. So I presented at our convention a 1-hour presentation with 6 rondo activities of a progressive nature. And the audience quite liked it, quite enjoyed it. So it's not a full lesson plan. It's just pieces that you might put in a lesson plan if you want. And the 1-hour video of the session is on YouTube, and I put it in the chat box. And then if you want to follow up with me or John and Tony afterwards, I put my Twitter handle and the NSCAC's Twitter handle in the chat box as well. So Tony, I'll get going if you want to have any observations or questions from there.
Oh, no, Ian, just continue on, please.
Okay, so the first rondo is the one, hopefully, can you see the screen, Tony and John?
Yep.
Okay, so everybody's seen this, right? And when I did this at the convention, and I looked at reviews online afterwards, somebody 3 minutes into the session said, "Why did I come to see this? I know this." So everybody calm down, it's okay. Everywhere you go in the world, when you watch players, and I'm talking about elite levels, Bayern Munich or an MLS team, or going over to else in Europe, you see the players informally get into a keep away game. A lot of guys on the outside, 1 or 2 in the middle, and they play keep away. So players like to do it. Players see it as something they do before the coach interrupts training. So I think it can be at a grassroots level and potentially a senior level, a managed activity. So you can see here, we've got the group around the outside. in this case, 2 players in the middle, and we're trying to split the 2 in the middle, penetrating pass across the grid, maintain possession. Because in a lot of our cases, our players are all in the same uniform. They hold onto a cone or a scrimmage vest that denotes that they are indeed the defender. And if they intercept it, they drop the cone, they go to the outside, another kid goes in. Everybody's familiar with that. How many defenders? That's a variable, right? How big the circle is of the group is a variable. If you move the players to the perimeter, to the outside of the circle, it has 1 energy, 1 vibe. But if you move the players inside the circle, it becomes much more challenging to the possession team. So even at the most humble grassroots level, you can manipulate this environment in any number of ways to increase the degree of potential intensity for the possession group. You could, of course, make it a defensive topic, working on the 2 or the 3 in the middle in tandem defending, but we use this as primarily kind of a warm-up possession. Now, my colleagues in the US who were very underwhelmed and thought it was beneath them to watch this session. So I really like to do 2-touch, 1-touch with this. And the idea is that you take 2 touches and that's the rhythm. But if, because the pressure is good, you're forced to play 1-touch, for the remainder of that possession, you stay at 1-touch. That incentivizes the 2 defenders to put some pressure on the ball, one of the ball possessors at some point, force them into 1-touch and accelerate the speed of play. So 2-touch to 1-touch is a really nice addendum. Another addendum to what you guys might consider a pretty straightforward rondo is, as the ball is traveling across to the receiver, the instruction is that the receiver cannot play it to the immediate right or left player. So you deny them the opportunity to pass it to this player or this player. So now what's happening, as the ball is running across, if the person to the immediate right and the immediate left are clued in, they will switch positions with the teammate to the outside of them. And so now you get an exchange of position here, you get an exchange of position here, and you're actually forcing players to move off the ball a little bit in anticipation of which player is going to receive it. So that's just kind of an interesting little wrinkle. If you choose to watch the YouTube that I posted, I had some MLS U14-15 players. So what I finally said was, okay, who are the 2 number 10s in your team? And we picked a couple of kids. And then at any time, that kid could wander into the middle of the grid as kind of a bumper. So now the player in possession could maybe hit a central player and wouldn't go all the way across the grid, but hit the central player who would then bump it out. But rather than leave the central player in permanently, which you certainly could do, we allowed players to walk through the grid at different times. And so now the defenders have the challenge of the person in possession, the person who's about to receive it, the fear of being split, and then also the potential of other players in the grid that are being used as connecting players. So the most fundamental of rondos, in my opinion, full group, but a ton of variables to really increase the relevance and certainly the technical dimension of this activity. And then furthermore, and it's actually in the YouTube, this is a great time where, depending on your comfort level with the social group you have, like if they know each other, if they're a pretty fired up, spunky group, if you've ever done this as a player, there's a lot of smack talking, right? You can have some fun here, and it can be an environment where you encourage the players to challenge each other. You kind of tease the 2 guys in the middle a little bit, and nobody wants to be in the middle. And if you can split them, or you can nutmeg them, or you can play it over them, or you can play a pass that maybe puts your teammate into a little bit of pressure and you're kind of trying to dump on them a little bit. So it can be, as we're starting to think about the components, technical, tactical, physical, and psychological, even in this most fundamental of warm-up that we all do, there is more complexity. So that was the first one, Tony. Fair enough?
Fair enough. Ian, if it gets too easy for the outside players, you can always add an extra player in the middle.
100%, right? Yeah. So The nice thing too, though, but I'm glad you brought that up, is if you're a grassroots coach, very common here in the US, you don't know how many players are going to be coming to training.
Yeah.
So you set this activity up and you play it for 5-6 minutes as the kids are pulling up in the car. It's not number contingent, right? So 7 kids show up, you've got a 5v2 or a 6v1 or a 5v3, depending, again, if you want to make it more challenging. But then after 5-6 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, you know, okay, now I've got 13 players at training and now I can move to my main activity. So it's a really nice activity for managing your training session as well. But absolutely, bring them inside the circle, make the circle smaller, more defenders. Yeah, a ton of variables to get the right pitch of challenge for your particular group. Okay, let's see if we can advance the screen. Let's see here. I'm probably going to have to turn this off. Just 1 second, guys. There we go. Okay, good. Forgive me, I'm just toggling back and forth between all of my variable.
No, I'm in the thing now. Okay.
John will mute somebody here in a second. So the same activity, the same basic activity, you can see down here, white versus blue, 1v5. Up here, blue versus white, 1v5. Could be 5v2. So as Tony was saying, more defenders, less defenders. But we've added in some elements of competition. We've added in some elements of transition, and we've added in a little bit, just a tiny bit, of physical conditioning and energy. So the groups are playing keep away, possession, but if the defender, the player in the middle or the players in the middle, can execute some sort of interception, they win the ball, whatever you determine to be a meaningful takeover, they're out. So they can now sprint. So this white kid here, he has got a touch on the ball, he's intercepted the ball, he's out. So he now runs across the grid, tags one of his teammates, and his teammate has to go in and be the defender. So what you get is you get some enthusiasm for being the defender because you want to get the heck out of there and get back to your teammates. You get the notion of a physical sprint because if we say to the 5, you're 2-touch when the defender's there, but when the defender leaves, you've got to keep moving the ball, but you've got to move it 1-touch. And maybe if you get 5 consecutive passes, you get a point. So the quicker he or she can get across the grid and get a teammate back, the quicker you can disrupt the passing patterns for the group of 5 or whatever. So if you do this with players and you've got a good energy amongst your players, it can be highly competitive. I like the idea too, the psychological transition of switching from I was out of possession, now I'm going to go over here and be with the possession team. It's quite a modest physical and psychological transition, but it's something I would bring out of this session if I had a group that I've done this with 3 or 4 times. So initially, it's a keep away possession activity, but after a while, I start to layer in some of the more psycho-emotional kind of things about how quickly can I do it? You know, what's the degree of adversity? What's the degree of competition? You'll notice here I've identified a couple of coaches. It's always nice if you've got some parent supporters or something, because what you want to do here is have a good supply of balls. So what you don't want is one ball on a hard surface and the ball is hardly ever in play. So these sets might be 90-second sets, as long as there's always a ball on hand for the coach to serve in. So the kids aren't chasing balls in this case. I'm an advocate of players shagging, chasing down their own balls. But in these types of activities, for maximum energy, have a good supply of balls and keep them coming in. Touch restrictions, number of defenders in the activity. Again, you can mess with it, vary it up, but it's a fun extension from where we were before for the previous activity. The other thing is, you can see that in this case, I know I've got 12 kids at training now. I'm comfortable. I'm 10 minutes into my session. I've got 12 kids. So I've already got them divided into my 2 teams. So I've got bibs on them, and we're already starting in the early part of training session to break into the working groups that I'm going to stick with through to the conclusion of training. So that's that activity. Right, turning off my annotation, moving to the next slide. Okay, so here's one that I use a lot. And the reason I use this one a lot is I feel like if I'm doing a clinic, regardless of the talent level of the players that I probably haven't met before, this has enough complexity in it, but also the potential to help them if they're struggling. So 2 different forms of keep away. To the left, a 4 versus 2 keep away in a rectangle. To the right, a 3 versus 1 keep away on a triangle. And you can appreciate that depending on the numbers of players you use, the shape of the activity, and also whether the players are standing inside the activity or outside of the grid, the possession players, you can get some really different looks in terms of angles, support shapes, split pass options, etc. So in the case of the 4 versus 2, and forgive me if some of you have, you've gone through all your licenses, but I think it bears reminding. The player in possession must have immediate support to his left, this player, and immediate support to his right, this player. The distance of that support, the angle of that support, is going to depend on the pressure of the 2 defenders. So in this case, I'm suggesting as the 2 reds approach the ball carrier, the player in the top right of the grid has to change his position and come a little closer to support, and the same for the player at the bottom left of the grid. However, if the pressure is not particularly strong, I'm asking my support players to stay as far away as possible, because if the ball is relocated to them, it's a bigger challenge for the 2 defenders. And then of course the split pass is our home run pass, because it hurts the opponents the most. It turns them around, it makes them have to play, spin 180, and we've really put the penetrating pass in. So a nice 4 versus 1 keep away, a 4 versus 2. What you want to monitor anytime you do these kind of activities is making sure the kids don't hang out in the corner and forget the movement component. So if the defending pressure is not very good here, and the 4 of them stand in the corners, I take one of them out and play 3v2 in a rectangle, and then they're always trying to find the open corner, if you will. So now you get that movement that you're looking for. If I move over to the right on the picture here, my 3v1, again, could be 3v2, whatever. You'll see I've got these kids positioned on the outside of the triangle, and the condition is now that you must play the ball obviously between the 2 cones in order for a successful pass. So the white player cannot come out, the blue players cannot come in, but the ball must always be played through the triangle so that the white player has the obvious opportunity to intercept it. Now, you have a situation where you only get 10 kids at training. You've got 6 in this grid, 4 in this grid, and you can kind of mix them up. So you could do exclusively one of these activities because you feel it's more useful to you, or you could do one 3v1 and one 4v1 and have them come into different grids. So I've now used restricted spaces of a circle, restricted spaces of a rectangle, and restricted spaces of a triangle. And I think they all offer you as the coach different little technical insights about angling and positions to bring out. So that was the 3rd set of rondos. And then there are other little, nice things here you can do, because now you've got your rectangles and your grids set up, that maybe you can move into different competitive and directional soccer, because you'll appreciate to this point, none of these 3 rondo activities, the previous 3 slides, have been strictly north-south directional. They've been very much the 360 degrees of the game. So, Tony, we good?
Yeah, Ian, I'm just going to play the devil here a little bit.
Yeah.
If we look at your 4v2, and I've done that a million times, and I'm sure coaches have done that a million times. Mm-hmm. If we look at the player with the ball right now, right? Mm-hmm. The player on his right and the player on his left, because we have cones, we're kind of limiting their choices for angle of support, right? Yeah. So, if you look at the top player and the bottom player, if the defender is really close to the player with the ball, maybe they can come a little bit wider. But as soon as we put the cones down, so we're limiting that choice, right?
Yeah.
Angle of support.
So, it's a great point, right?
Yeah.
So
and that's my only thing with it. But of course, in terms of, keep away and keeping possessions and quickness and 1-2 touches. It's a great little game.
Well, and I appreciate the point. So if we go back, let's see if I can go back 1 second. Previous.
Yep.
Previous. For the sake of the diagram, I put the circle in here, right? The white circle. It might be around the center circle, or you might put some cones down.
Yep.
But how many times do players actually do this without any defined marking, right? And actually, you'll see it on the YouTube video. So the Chicago Fire players, they made their own space because they were lazy, not lazy, but it was easy for them. And I said to them, just walk in. So sometimes as coaches, we don't need to put down as much equipment as we want to, right? We don't need to, because you can kind of let the players define their space. But to Tony's point though here, absolutely. In this particular scenario in the top left, we've restricted the players to a restricted space. And there's a big differentiation in restricted space and unrestricted space in a lot of our coaching methodology. Now, ultimately, the game is played on a restricted space. So the fullback, the winger, has probably got less of the field to play with because they're to the sideline and they've got a white line behind them.
Right.
However, what I would do here, Tony, is I might say, okay, any one of the 4 of you at any point can cheat outside the grid for a 1 or a 2 touch. So if you feel that this player is limited and you want to free him up, he can go out here, and he's got a 1-2 touch back, get the ball back in, and then he's got to step back in and another kid can come out. On this one to the right, because I've got the 3 blues on the outside, and it's really interesting because when you do this with kids, they'll stand on the line between the 2 cones, and you'll be like, but you could literally go and stand 20 yards away, and as long as you can complete the pass through the cones, you can give yourself unlimited space. So the white player here, because these kids are free, cannot reasonably pressure them unless they stand on the line. So managing lines and whether we can step beyond them or step into them, Tony makes a very good point. So always be cognizant of what the lines and the restricted space do for you to your topic, or if they actually hamstring your kids. It's a good point, Tony.
Right.
Okay. Let's see here, moving along. Okay, so now we're getting to things that are a bit more number-wise, competitive, different challenges. This one comes out very nicely on the YouTube video, and I really like to do this one because it has some elements of periodization, which is obviously a hot topic for everybody, but just means a little bit of planning, really. So I've got my 5v3 keep away in red. I've put the bumper player in the middle. So maybe in this case, I've identified my central midfielder, my number 10. And I said, I want you to kind of find this space. I really like it very often that this player can be self-selected and can switch in and out, and they do it themselves. But in this case, let's say I've just said, all right, let's put that 10 player in there. Gone with 5v3, seems like a good number to me. And the object for the red is possession. Splitting could be a possession objective. So if you can split them, then you get additional credit. It could be that if this player can keep possession off of a 1 touch, that could be a possession objective. It could be consecutive passes, because if the 3 blues deny the split because they just defend as a blob, then you can't split them. So, but you should be able to give them possession around the activity. You can see I've got 2 blues down here as subs, and you can see I've got 3 balls, or balls with the coach, a couple of balls with the coach. The idea here is we can manage the degree of pressure on the 5, because the 5 are my ultimate focus. I want them to be working on possession, angles of support, first and second touch, looking ahead, bigger vision, split passes, all those things that we would typically have in a possession activity. If the 3 are too good, they're too strong initially, I can pull 1 out. So it's a 5v2. If the 3 get tired, I can sub them out for their teammates, or I could allow them to sub themselves out, which is actually pretty interesting. So any one of the 3, if he or she is feeling tired, can just tag a teammate in. So I've got my 5v3, it could be a 5v2, a 5v1. I can manipulate it, or the players can self-select the degree of pressure they think is appropriate. And then what do the 5 mini goals represent? They represent the transitional objective for the 3. Because if we say to the 3, if you win it, try to keep it, it doesn't work so well because the 5 just jump on top of them. But if I say to the 3, now you can score on any one of the 4 goals, and if you do that, you become the 5, your teammates join you and the Reds become the defending team. The Blues have a very good incentive to win the ball and score. And the Reds have a very good incentive, should they lose it, to try to win it straight back. It's much more fun being the team of 5 than the team of 3, the majority of the time. So you've started to introduce notions of speed of play, or really speed of transition. How quickly can we switch from being the 3 out of possession to the 3 trying to find a mini goal? How quickly can we switch from being the 5 in possession to regaining it so we can continue to be the 5 in possession? Again, the coach is maintaining the balls here. So imagine if you were doing this in 2 grids. So there's another group at the top, and this group up here has 1 soccer ball, and this group down here has a coach who has a steady stream of balls that you can supply. Play for 90 seconds. The actual activity in this group with the coach firing the ball in will be 90 seconds of the ball in play and physical activity, guaranteed. If there's only 1 ball up here, it's going to be out of bounds most of the time. So you've got 2 groups doing the same activity, and you think you're equalizing the degree of pressure and challenge and all those things, and you're not at all. And now if you compare that, so now you're training your team, and one of your club mates is coaching his or her team on the other field, you look like you're doing the same activity, but the degree of physical engagement for the players, which then ties into technical and physical demand, is completely different. So the quality of the surface and the quality of the supply of balls with intention is critical. Maybe you want the ball to go out of bounds, everybody resets, you as the coach step in and make some points. Or maybe you just want 90 seconds of to the wall activity. So again, and so, you know, and I think John and Tony and I have worked together a lot. So I think we all speak from the same hymn book on this one. None of us can show any of you guys on the call an activity or a drill that you probably haven't seen before, or you couldn't find if you Google something on the website. So it's not about 1,001 activities. It's not about that at all. It's about how you as the coach, with intention for what you want to achieve, manipulate the variables that you can manipulate. So if you've only got, in this case, you know, a 6-a-side field, you can have a perfectly reasonable training session with senior players because that's the only space you've got. If you've only got 1 soccer ball, then you're going to have a different type of activity than if you've got unlimited supply of soccer balls. So again, the trick is managing the variables for what your objective is. It's not the drill itself, right? It's not about the activity. It's about how you tweak it to elicit the responses you want. Fair enough, coach? Okay.
Sounds good.
So this one, you can watch the Chicago Fire Boys do it, and it's really good because they were really good players. Or you can Google Pep Guardiola doing it with Bayern Munich, and it's even better. But this is really popular in the Spanish Federation. I've seen this done by Spanish Federation coaches for almost a decade. And the activity is simply the red players, 1 at the south, 1 at the north, and 1 in the middle, are fixed. And then the 4 players on the flanks in blue are a team, and the 4 whites in the middle are a team. So at this point, the reds and the blues constitute a team of 7. The whites constitute a team of 4. If the whites can achieve a turnover, they can win possession, clear possession, then the whites and the blues exchange position. But the activity is always the red team in possession with the 4, what we would consider flank players. Now, the way that the Spanish do this is they're pretty clear that this player is typically a 9 or a 5, one of your central players. So these players are 9s or 5s, players that tend to play at the extremities of your team and have a lot of play in front of them or directly behind them, or space. And then this player, of course, would be one of your creative 10s, one of your central midfielders that has to play in that 360-degree orientation. The players out here are more of your 3 and your 2, your 7 and your 11, your flank players who are more used to being on the side of the field with only 180 degrees of the field to play in. They're used to being in those peripheral positions. And so it's just an up and back. But what's really nice as you start to shift this is the immediate support to the left and right is always a good option for the ball carrier. Obviously, trying to hit the central target is a good option. If we don't allow the ball to go above head height, trying to get it one long pass through to the other side is an option, but very difficult to execute given there's 4 defenders in there. But you can also, the ball carrier could also potentially play the longer diagonal to the more advanced player. So essentially the ball carrier here, if he's a 5, let's say, he's got or she's got a left back, a right back, a left flank, a right flank, a central midfielder, a 10, a 6, and then that target player. You can put the touch restrictions in, you manipulate the size of the space. This one really does dictate that you have you need a minimum of 3 to get the core of the team going, and you need some sort of 4v4 or 3v3. Obviously you could be down a number here or there. A couple extra numbers, put 2 number 10s in, and now it becomes an 8v4. So be aware of what you're doing to your numbers. The Spanish love this, and I think the reason they like it so much is once you get this particular activity going, you get lots of little micro movement from your flank players. There's something about this activity that enhances or excites movement from players, at least in my experience. It also gives the ball carrier a lot of really interesting short and long, vertical and somewhat horizontal or diagonal passing options. So if you think about, and Tony and I were talking off air about 2008, 2010, 2012 Spanish teams, Iniesta, Xavi, Messi, but those glory teams, if you watch them, the ability to find every type of pass, long, short, vertical, horizontal, diagonal, is sort of built into this training session. And I'm sure that Pep Guardiola is using this training session with Man City. My objection to it, and I've tried to argue this with the Spanish, but they have more they're probably more popular than the English or the American national team, so it's hard to argue with them, is that this player right now, this player here, would essentially be a left deep player. But when the ball is down this side, they're now essentially a higher right-sided player. And for me, I struggle with that for a youth development point of view, right? I worry sometimes that if you play these back and forth type games, the players aren't quite sure what position you're trying to prepare them for. I think what the Spanish would argue is this is really about technical possession, identifying passes. It doesn't matter if you're on the left flank or the right flank, because basically as the ball goes from end to end, you go from left flank to right flank. If you are already comfortable playing with inverted wingers and things like that, you probably don't mind. So just be aware, if you've told the kid that there are 2 on your team, and all of a sudden in this activity, they're now an 11 on the team, at least part of the time, it can be a bit challenging. So.
Ian,
yeah,
do you mind if I add something to this?
Please.
Can you go back to your previous slide?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I mean, I use this too a lot in my training session. So one of the things that I do, similar to what you have, but instead of having your 2 outside players just not participate, I put them in the other grid. And so now when the blue team wins the ball, they play to them. So now we're learning about transition. So as soon as we win it, we play forward to somebody. And then, of course, now the 3 players who are in the first grid, they need to find their angle of support, their space, while 3 more red players need to go in transition. Think about when and how fast they are thinking, right? To go in there and try to win the ball back, right? So now you get all of these different dynamics going on, talking about, it's the minute you lose the ball, the split second you lose the ball, where do you go? What do you do, right? And if you have it, well, how do I support? Which side do I go to, and so on. So I use this quite a bit, and I use the other one as well, the one, your last one, for the same reason, where I'm trying to emphasize transition, right? Where the 4 players on the outside, as soon as they lose the ball, now all of a sudden they have to think about coming in, closing in the space, while the other ones need to create the width, create the depth, so they can keep possession of the ball. So they're always thinking, they're always playing the game, right? On the defensive side, on the attacking side, and you have your transition in between, right? Because I think a lot of players don't think about that moment, when you win it or lose it. There's always that hesitation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You make a really good point. And just to emphasize, I'll go in reverse, or I'll emphasize Tony's last point, and then I'll go back to his earlier one. In this activity, when the whites win it, if the whole thing stops and the whites amble out and the blues amble in and you start again, it's okay. And I probably would be okay with that initially, just to get the rhythm of the activity going. But absolutely, what I want to get to the point is it switches on the fly. So at the point where the whites win it, they immediately give it to a red and they get the heck out of there, and the blues get the heck in. So that you're not always stopping these activities because of a loss of possession or a turnover. The players have to continue the activity themselves. So 100%. So be aware of that, because these activities lose a lot of their meaning and energy if you don't have that encouragement of change on the fly, switch on the fly, 100%. And then Tony's, sorry, I got the wrong way, previous. The other point here, yeah, this is one of my favorite activities. Take the 4 goals away, put the 2 blue players on the top of this grid, and now if the 3 win it, they knock it to their teammates, and now you get a 5v3 here, and the Reds have to send some over. So what I like about that version, again, take away the 4 goals and just put the 2 blue players into this grid. So this is the blue grid, this is the red grid. Now when the blues win it, they've got to get their heads up and play an expansive pass out of pressure. So that's a really good point. Mm-hmm. Where these 2 position themselves is really important too, because very often they'll stand on this line, which is no use at all. They need to be up here and big, but they also, when their chums win it, need to be thinking about how to get open. So you can work with these 2 off the ball. And then the 5 have to make a decision about which 2 players or 3 players go over, transition to defense. So playing that version, so again, set up the same grid, 2 different versions, same basic points, different games, keep the kids moving. So yeah, but both of those, Tony, 100%. Okay, let's go next and next and next. So this is my last slide, and then I'll come off and we'll take some questions if John and Tony are managing. So now I take my rondo and I basically put a rondo in the middle of the field. Maybe I use cones, maybe I don't. But what you can see here is I'm working with my red team. So my red team is going to goal, because I've only got 1 goalkeeper in this particular scenario. So whites are defending the goal, reds are attacking it. I'm the coach with the soccer balls. I feed the ball into the reds, and I've created here a 5 or a 6v3 midfield activity. And the reds have to keep it for a certain number of passes. And it's pretty free form. If the whites win it, they have counter options there, and there, passing counter options. But my reds possess it, and once they've done that, one of them can release with the ball to make it a 3v2 to goal, or they can knock it into the 2 red targets, and then 1 or 2 of them can support. So I can get a really quick 3v2, 4v2 to goal. But I've put my rondo into ultimately a directional thing. So we're in the heart of the field where this would happen. Tight spaces. Maybe we've got a numerical advantage. I've given a pretty big numerical advantage here. You can manage that. And then we break to goal. once they've had their quick attack, I don't really care. Let me rephrase that. The attack is not the point, right? So if I'm sending 3 or 4 to goal, I want a shot, but then I want them quickly back so I can feed the ball in. So it's all about the rondo in here that sets up the entry pass into the strikers. If you've got a senior level team, you manipulate the numbers down here and you expect various patterns off of this. If you only play with one central striker, play with one central striker here because that's more realistic, and let a winger come in because you play 4-3-3. So how you shape it is completely up to you. Obviously, you can see here with my numbers, I can quickly flip the reds versus the whites. So the whites can become the possession team, the reds can become the defending team. And if I have the joy of a second goalkeeper, I drop my second goalkeeper in here, and either I can play this both ways. So I could have a 2v2 here, a 2v2 here. It could be an even number rondo, and the first team that can possess it and knock it out gets the attack. But the key is every single time we reset this activity, we begin with the rondo keep away in here. But we're probably ultimately building this to an even numbers rondo to replicate more like the real game. Do you play with 4-3-3? Do you play with 4-2-2? What does your central midfield look like? And what do you anticipate your opposing central midfield would look like? When your midfield are going forward, what are they looking at? Are they looking at 2 targets? Are they looking at 1 target and a winger and a winger? So you manipulate this because this is now basically your penultimate training activity before you go to your even numbers game. So it's highly realistic. So this is where you really want this to be your best number 9. You really want this guy to really be your best centre back. That's your goalie. So this becomes incredibly functional now, but it's continuing your theme of rondos, tight possession with a purpose, the purpose to get forward and then to score goals. Fair enough, Tony?
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, you mentioned the word functional. You could use that also as your rondos can be used as a preamble to your functional training, right? Just like you said there. So you have your 2 strikers on top. If you're going to play against a team that plays with 3 at the back, put 3 over there and your 2 strikers. And now they take what they've learned in the previous rondos about keeping possession, about transition, all of that, and they apply into this other much larger, much bigger rondo, and then of course you translate all of that into the big game. So I love rondos. I think they're amazing. But
yeah, one of the things, the diagrams, as I'm looking at this, because obviously the training session online was January of 2019. It becomes very difficult for all of our players when they receive the ball to turn with the ball and not be dispossessed. So you'll see here a lot of my diagrams, the person that receives the ball tends to play the ball the way they're facing. And then you'll notice, and you'll see other diagrams, it's a lot about I get turned without the ball. So, this player here in the center, if he receives it with opponent, I wouldn't encourage him to turn. Play it the way you're facing. Now move and get open to where you want to go. Get faced up by moving here. And now when you receive the ball back, it's coming across the face of you and you're going to goal. So especially with our young players, knowing where the pressure is, playing the way you're facing, playing the way you're facing, playing with your facing, but always with the goal, when you don't have this challenge of the ball, getting your hips and shoulders and head open to the direction you want to go. Because too often our players get squared off. So they'll support the player in possession, but they won't be ready to take the ball somewhere else. So those are some of the little clues in there too. So if I just real quickly rewind, my big final rondo, the very popular Spanish 7v4, the 5v3 with various options, the 4v2, 3v1 keepaways, but much more things to manage there than would initially appear to the eye. So the parents watching from the sidelines, they don't know the degree of potential sophistication. Nice little competitive game of rondos, and then the traditional warm-up one, which I still think has a lot more in it than people realize from a psychosocial, but also touches, key players, movement off the ball. You can do a lot of things with all of these. So, John and Tony, that was the six slides I wanted to share.
Thank you, Ian. And you know, going back to your first slide, the players love that game, especially when they first start. They get on the field and they get ready. You know, once they're joking around, you'll see them when you watch them doing, you know, the big guys, right? They're all enjoying themselves. They're all having fun. You know, they're thinking, of course, they're getting ready for the training session. So it's a great one, and I think we all use it. Most of us use it anyway. It's, you know, whenever we have an opportunity to do that.
Yeah. So the 6 slides I can make available to the NSCAC, and anybody can have them or can reach me. I did put in the chat box there's an hour's video of me trying to bring that session to life with MLS Academy players, and it's pretty good watching, actually. And then I put 2 Twitter handles, mine and the NSCAC's. So if you wanted to reach myself or Tony or John. And then I'm also prompting, because I'm kind of the warm-up act for Craig Brown next Thursday. So next Thursday, the guy's got Craig Brown, former national coach for the Scottish national team, who is a total gentleman and a global clinician. So if you got anything from me, you'll get infinitely more with Craig next week. So please tune in. I think I might be there for Craig Brown next week myself.
Thank you, Ian.
Thanks. There's some question and answers. I don't know if you can see that, Ian.
Yeah.
Might want to
Okay.
look
So
at some of it.
yeah, we'll go real quick with Dave. I do the 2 in the middle a lot. It teaches first touch going to, yeah, Dave, agree. Play 2 or more. Yeah. So Dave Glick talks about the movement in the big rondo of just getting players to move off the ball. Casey Schaefer, thank you. Yeah, different ways, call out the color of exchanging external visual cue. Yeah, there's all kinds of things like that you can do with having the players verbalize some of the transitional moments, for sure. Chris Harrington, so this would have been probably right around the 7v4 activity. I think if ball goes end to end, then the fullbacks can both switch to actual support on the opposite. Yeah, okay. And Chris has seen Rayo Vallecano do it. So those flank players in the 7v4, if I understand what Chris is saying, they exchange. Mary is calling in from the Bahamas. That's Mary, right? Mary Woodside knows. I recognize Mary. We cannot see the link in chat that Ian talked about. Okay. So John, we need to make sure that your colleagues can see the chat panel. It doesn't sound like Mary can. Mary, if you can't see it, email me or text me and I'll get it to you. Mary, you know how to get a hold of me. On the original rondo, I'd go with 2 teams, 2v2 in the middle. Yeah, I like that, David. David, you got some interesting ones. We can't see the MLS link and Twitter handle. Okay. Mary continuing to complain about that.
I don't know how to fix that.
Yeah. So Peter, let's see. Well, actually, you know what I can do? Let me, 1 second, everybody. Okay, let's see if I can do this. Hold on. Let's see if I can type an answer, at least to Mary. Okay, Mary, I just sent you the link. David, okay. It seems like you all can't see it. Maybe when you get the recording, but if you go to YouTube and you Google Rondos 2019 Chicago Convention, Dustin Wheelock seems to have got it. Rondos 2019 Chicago Convention, you can find it, or you can reach out to me, John, or Tony, and we'll make sure you get it, because there's 13 of you on the call. So that's sorry, 35 of you on the call. So that's a great showing. So thank you very much for your patience and tolerance and putting up with me. So thank you for that.
Good.
All right, Ian, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So, I mean, you and I were talking about it before, right? I've always called them small-sided games, right? And now we call them rondos. Is there a difference between the two, or they're the same thing?
Well, actually, I'm glad you bring the distinction up, because if you just play keep away, if the coach is managing the training session, so, you know, we as players play keep away really just for smack talking and just fun and engagement, right? But if you're the coach and you're doing it, and it's just about the bigger number, keeping it away from the little number, and you don't make it competitive, it very quickly runs out of steam. So if the notion of a game is essentially achieving an objective of some sort, there should be an objective for the majority, the possession team. It should be number of passes, a split pass, whatever that objective is. And then there has to be an objective for the defending team. There has to be a way for them to get out. And also, if they get out, benefit from getting out. So I think we'd all agree, if the kids in the middle at any kind of level just kick the ball away, they've stopped the other team possessing it, but they haven't retained possession. They've just kicked it away. So Rondo game, I think to your point, Tony, the bottom line is make sure it's competitive in some capacity, and competitive for both teams. There is a consequence for being the good 3-person defending team, and in the same way there's a consequence or an objective for the 5 or 6 in possession. So yeah, game, rondo, keep away, but at the end of the day, players want it to have meaning. Otherwise they just look at you and go, why are we doing this, right?
Yeah, yeah. And you know, coaches can get really creative when they set up their players on, when they run their training session. And to me, the rondo gives all of the players the opportunity to make more decisions, right? In a shorter period of time, touching the ball a little bit more. The defenders, they learn how to defend better, the midfielders. So, because everything is concentrated, right? It happens, you know, 10 times more than it would happen if you did just, you know, a 9v9 or a 10v10 game, right? So
absolutely, frequency, right? It's all about, that's why that supply of soccer balls from the coach,
right,
gives you 20 repetitions of something in the game you're only going to see once, but 20 repetitions in training potentially improve your one opportunity in the game. The other thing about this competition piece, this is a little bit off topic, but basically, for those of you listening, if your player has a perception of their ability and they have a perception of the amount of demand you're putting in, your job is to match the perception of their ability with the perception of the demand. If they think they have a lot of ability and they think the training is underwhelming, they're bored. If they are beginning players and they think that the training is too challenging, they get very anxious and frustrated and disappointed. So, and now you've got 18 players and you're trying to think about this with 18 individuals as well as a group of 18. But the trick of a coach, and this is where you're manipulating the variables, is continually matching their perception of their ability with the perception of the demand, and then elevating them both. And if you can keep that sweet spot up, you're keeping your players engaged, you're improving their level, and you're actually being an effective coach. Running the same training session every time with the same group of players is the definition of lunacy. as stated by Einstein, by the way. So we're on Einstein now.
I know. Ian, I mean, as always, you know, I always enjoy listening to you, and I'm looking forward, as we were said before, that maybe, you know, we'll have you come over one of these days, and so we can see you live, you know, doing more sessions like this.
Yeah, I've had good times in Toronto with John at Guelph University with the association, and then I had a couple of good experiences at Pickering with the good people at Pickering Soccer Club. So anytime I can get up to Ontario and there's a good reason to come, I'd love to come up and visit my North American brothers and sisters.
Great. Well, we're gonna. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
we're gonna definitely try. Obviously, with COVID, we're trying to stop doing our little mini convention, which we started, but we're gonna see if we can get that restarted. And Ian, we'd certainly love to have you up. Thank you very much for putting on this presentation, and hopefully we'll get you on for a few more if you're up to it.
Always, yeah, always happy to join in if I'm helpful to you guys. But Tony and John, great to see you, and Thanks everybody for staying on the call for so long. I'm truly honored about that. Thank you.
Ian,
Thank you, everyone.
Bye,
Thank you.
guys.
Okay.